Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your slightly bloated in the plot department host, Madelyn.
I'm your there's a main plot again host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's side quest episode, where we're talking about the topic of my choice.
Yes,
it's my turn to have
Madelin's
the control.
week.
And I've decided that this week our show is going to be about pacing in video games, answering the long discussed question, are games too long?
It's really the question for our time, you know?
I waited until it was, just a warm button issue.
Yeah.
I waited out that 6 weeks. I think I could have talked about it 6 weeks ago, maybe. That's wild, because that doesn't feel that long ago.
I don't.
The whole 2020's pacing could use a little bit of work, to be honest.
No, yeah, it was probably like 6-ish weeks ago, maybe more, because it was around when The Last of Us 2 came out, and that was like
6-ish weeks ago.
That was like mid-June, early-ish June,
and now it's August.
Yep.
Wow. Boy, do I have some quibbles with the pacing that's going on in the 2020 writers' room. Folks, please, can we just get a rhythm going here?
Hire an editor.
The murder hornets are back. Did you see that on the news today?
Oh, that's cheesy.
They've captured a murder hornet.
That you can't bring the murder hornets back after this long. Come on now.
Maybe
there was no foreshadowing.
Maybe it wasn't that long. I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna stick to video games. We're not gonna critique too much of the pacing of this year. So what made me think about this, actually, honestly, was looking at our Nintendo Switch profiles and seeing the time played in various games. And it made me think about, why are there games like Animal Crossing, where I'm willing to put in 150-some hours to date, or games like Fire Emblem, where Emma's put in how many hours about?
It's not important.
Like, give us a ballpark.
Oh, it's in 3 figures, you know?
Right, but like, so like 100?
No, something like that. There's 100 in it.
Right. Anyway, Emma's played maybe a concerning amount of Fire Emblem in the last year. We won't make her share on air. We'll save that for the professionals. But why are there games where we're willing to put in that amount of time? Or even the less extreme examples where you play a 40-hour game and it feels super fast and like you want to get through it. And why are there other games like Talk This mainstay now, Trails of Cold Steel, where you want to play about a quarter of the game and then you're already ready for the end?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and then I've been thinking about pacing a little bit in general since that kind of bizarro Twitter firestorm. So now I will be the man stepping into the arena to discuss how we can pace games correctly and what works and what doesn't, and have a whole big old talk about that. So obviously, of course, the natural thing that causes pacing in most games is controller drift. So if you find that your character is just pacing around the map, you may want to do a quick YouTube of how you can fix your drifting controller.
Yeah.
I have not really found that those things work, but I'm also bad at them.
Yes.
But you can give it a try. So that's been our show. Thanks for tuning in. Pacing fixed. That's how you make a game with good pacing. So, there's a lot of different ways to come at this, right? Mostly in terms of, not mostly, one way in terms of the type of game, right? Because figuring out pacing is very different if you're telling a plotted story, or if you're creating an open world game, or if you're creating a game where you're supposed to kind of come back over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So let's start by talking a little bit about story-driven or defined story games. Start there, I guess, and we can work our way outward from there. So, Emma, I feel like you had a list of games that you felt like were nicely paced. Do you want to start there?
Yeah. I took like 30 seconds and thought about games I've played recently about that I think would say have perfect pacing or near perfect pacing, whatever. I use the extreme
You don't have to qualify it, it's fine.
I use the extreme to make my point. And I came up with, I think, A Short Hike has pretty perfect pacing. Flower, Journey, those games, I think, have perfect pacing. And then my unpopular opinion probably is that I think that Danganronpa V3 has perfect pacing. Especially the last trial has stellar pacing. Of course, all of these are, like, extremely different games, right? Like, A Short Hike is, like, a very smallish open world, you know? Like, it's got open world ethos to it, but it's very contained into a small but dense area. Flower and Journey are very, like, impressionistic type things, where you're just moving forward and there's no, like, there's narrative, but there's not, like, the, you know, cutscenes and stuff. And then, obviously, Danganronpa V3 is a 40-hour visual novel adventure game, which is pretty long for adventure games. I might be stretching that. Maybe it's, like, 30 hours.
Talking about it that way makes me, for whatever reason, it's just struck me to appreciate how difficult this is relative to, like, 40 hours is multiple seasons of television.
Yeah.
Right? Which is not, it's an obvious comparison to make, but it is one that just struck me especially vividly at this moment. Like, 40 hours of a television show is like an American television show, is maybe 3 seasons?
Yeah.
If they're, like, 20-ish episode seasons, then it's a 40-minute show. Or it's, like, 6 seasons. And we've all seen what happens to comedy shows after season 3 or 4 or so. So it does give me a little bit of a different perspective on, like, man, this is really hard.
I mean, it's different, though, right? Like, I mean, Danganronpa V3 is a bit of an exception because all of that is writing, right? But if you're just thinking about, like, stuff that's sort of taking cues from blockbuster films, like the Uncharted games.
Sure.
Like, even that is significantly different from blockbusters. I was reading one Game Sutra article that was mentioning that, like, in, like, a movie or a TV show, like, every battle or event or conflict is important, right? Because it's part of this narrative that's happening. Whereas in games, you get a lot of battles that aren't necessarily important. Like, obviously, this is a generalization. There's some games that are just bosses, and there's some games where there's small amounts of fights or conflicts, but generally, you'd get games where there's some, like, sort of cannon fodder-esque fights.
Absolutely, a lot of grunt fights.
Yes, which I do also think is part of why they're so hard to adapt to film, because the pacing, if you just take the parts that are cinematic, the pacing doesn't work because it's using the parts that are just traversal or just cannon fodder fights as pacing supplements. That if you just go from event to event to event, like I think a lot of movies adaptations do, it doesn't work because the pacing's not correct for a movie.
Well, it's also tricky because watching a boss fight most of the time is inherently less interesting than performing the boss fight, if that makes sense, right? Not all boss fights are designed to be cinematically interesting, right? The difficulty of having to play it is a big part of the stakes of that. Like, I did not even enjoy watching myself do the fight in the reactor in either of them in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Did not enjoy either of those. Was not a fun fight, really, for me as a player, even, to be honest. No, that's not true. It was just a little, like, oh, grindy, That was my impression of myself.
Mal doesn't know how to block, so...
Yeah.
This was a problem.
I know. It was fine. I didn't have as much trouble as my boyfriend did on those fights. Just saying. He had a real hard time. But it's even makes the adaptation even trickier because there's this outside element of adrenaline and involvement.
Right, because the boss fight itself needs the classic pacing structure. Right?
Absolutely.
Where tension is growing as the fight progresses. And because the player is participating in that, it has to be extended outside of what a boss fight would be on screen.
Yeah.
You know, what are the equivalent of a boss fight in, like, a sci-fi or fantasy show.
And I can have a stressful boss fight a third of the way through the game where I'm stressed because, I mean, whatever, not that there are any stakes to dying in boss fights in most games, right? You just do it again, but, like, I can feel stressed about it because I don't want to die a third of the way through the game. I'm not going to feel super stressed about a boss fight a third of the way through the movie because, like, character's not going to die. Come on. Right? Like, most of the time, character's not going to die at that, like, first climactic boss. Like, come on.
Sure.
Anyway, I didn't mean to make this too much of a one-to-one comparison between television or movies and between games. But it does show that obviously the pacing challenges are way different than if you're crafting something that's just narrative. Because like you said, a lot of the players are bored with cutscenes.
Yeah.
If you do lots of cutscenes, the players will be like, there are lots of cutscenes. In the negative category on Metacritic. So that's a challenge in and of itself, is that you're battling against a significant portion of your player base probably that is actively resistant to your narrative taking up time.
Right. And, like, one of the ways people try to do that is, like, interactive cutscenes, right? Like, you can still move around while characters are talking to you. But then, of course, the issue with those is when you put the player in control while things are happening, what are they doing? Are they listening to the character, or are they jumping up and down a lot and looking at every nook and cranny of the room and assessing their guns? And, like, what are they doing during that time? Exactly.
So it's really challenging. It's, if we're, like, kind of scaling it backward, right, in movies and television, you set the camera and you tell them where to look. And, yeah, like, to some extent you can't control if they're, like, looking at their phone through an important part of the scene, but that's universal, And then you take a step back and there's, like, theater, right, and you get to watch, like, that's always one of the, like, joys of theater as it's been described to me by other people, right, is you can watch Susie in the back row if she's your niece, and you want to pay attention only to her, right? And that's, like, what you want to do. And then video games, I feel like, take that back even a step further, where instead you can just run around. So, all of this to say, all of this discussion that we're having today acknowledges that this is not easy, and this is not coming from a place of, we know how to fix this 100%.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it exactly right, you're bad at this and you shouldn't make games.
Yeah.
It's challenging.
More than games being too long, I do think that a lot of games, maybe stereotypically Japanese games, but I think Western games have started, in the collectible area especially, doing this a bit too much. Of just side quests. And, like, some side quests, good, great, cool stuff. Good supplementary short stories to your story, whatever. But, like, two recent games that I have been playing, like the Trails of Cold Steel 2 and Final Fantasy VII Remake, like, they just stick a bunch of side quests, like, right before, like, their climactic moments. And, like, sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it's like, when we go here, there's no going back, right? But there's not, like, a time pressure.
I always appreciate that warning.
Yeah.
When they're like, there's no going back.
Yeah. I mean, that warning's great, yes. But, like, if it's something that's, like, not, like, a time pressure, but just, like, once you go there, you can't go back.
Yeah.
But in both those games, like, it's like there's somewhat of a time pressure. Like, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're going to rescue Aerith.
Right, we're just going to leave her to get experimented on for
and in Trails of Cold Steel 2, they're like, hey, the final battle starts at noon today, but I bet you can get some jobs in first, folks. Always about that hustle. And I was thinking about it, I was like, why? It bothered me a little in Final Fantasy VII Remake, but not a ton. And in Trails of Cold Steel, it bothered me a ton. And so I was thinking about why, and I think it had to do with, like, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, at least some of those side quests were paced well in themselves. Like, each of them had sort of distinct goals and little tiny story plots, and they were sort of varied in the goals that you were attempting to achieve, right? So each of them, even though in the main arc of the story it didn't feel super well paced, like in the moment to moment it was fine. Whereas in Trails of Cold Steel it's like, here's 3 monsters. They're big bad monsters. Have fun, kids. So they're exactly the same. There's absolutely no story behind them. It was just like the fact that I had done all the other side quests up to that moment. I was like, well, I got 100% it.
See, I think that I feel like the obsession with platinuming things has become much more mainstream.
Yeah.
Over the past me paying attention to it, I guess. But perhaps as more and more social media has become just grown with every passing day.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if some of that comes from the fact, I think we've talked about this on the show before, that in previous times, at least as a kid anyway, a lot of times you would get a game, and that would be the game that you played for several months.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to now, at least for us,
yeah.
Right? There's a part of me that wants to be 100%er on games, right? Which is why I will get too absorbed in side quests
mm-hmm.
in an attempt to do as many of them as I possibly can. But I am not... Collectibles are hard for me to get into in the same way. Especially if there's not a way for me to easily track them, or I'm not going to be able to find them without Googling where they are.
Yeah.
So I'm like a weak... I don't think I've ever platinumed a game, or if I did, it was unintentional and easy to do
same
so.
Here.
That's not true. Maybe if Kingdom Hearts 1 original on PS2 had such a thing as a platinum, I might have done that. Not 1.5 when they made everything harder. Like, I forged Ultima Weapon then, I would never, ever, ever do it now.
Yeah.
Because it's so much harder. So maybe that. But again, only because it was a game that I played many times.
Yeah.
And had old save files for, and that kind of thing.
That's how it works, though. You have to, generally, for games where platinuming is actually an achievement, you have to play the game multiple times.
Sure. And fair. I guess basically what I'm saying is, I wonder if some of that idea has certainly contributed to this kind of side quest bloat of making that into something that's hard and something that people tweet about. And also, of course, the pressure of everything has to be open world in some capacity.
Right.
Now. Certainly doesn't help. But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about, so I made a list of games. I don't have, like, perfectly paced games. I couldn't think of anything off the top of my head. I do agree about A Short Hike. Although I feel like I cannot think of a game that I've played and I've thought, that game was too short.
Yeah.
So A Short Hike is excellent in that it knew that it should be this bite-sized piece, but I also can't think of any game that I've played that's on, in that 5 hours or less zone where I felt like, oh, I wish there was more.
Yeah.
In a way that's not like, oh, I'd like to see what they do next.
Yeah.
Anyway, I made a list because I feel like I have been playing a lot of games recently where that I've really liked, like 3 or maybe even 4 games here that I've really enjoyed and that have been delightful experiences. But I got too engrossed in the side quests in the final act, and the story momentum kind of completely petered out.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of picked it up as the final act happened, but it's something I have kind of mixed feelings about, because I really enjoyed I felt like the side quests in these games, for some of them anyway, were some of what I really enjoyed about the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of a weird balance that I'd love to unpack a little bit with you here on the show.
Sure.
So obviously the biggest one that I felt like fell into this trap for me was Yakuza 0. Which, it's like, some of it's gotta be on purpose, right?
Sure.
Part of the problem is also that I don't have that much patience for, like, chapter select or post-game content. Mm-hmm. Again, like I said, because there's 20 games that I should be playing at any given moment.
Yeah.
So I spent, of course, you've heard about this on the show if you've listened to our, like, recaps of what we've played. I think I finished this one, not, like, the last 6 weeks, but the previous one before that. I got way too into the Cabaret Club. because it's the best part of the game. But also, I spent way too much time doing, like, curious, dumb real estate thing because I wanted to finish it. Mm-hmm. My, like, 100%er in me was like, you gotta do it. You gotta take down all the 5... Are they the 5-star? I can't remember which is which. The 5 stars?
I don't remember.
Whatever. The 5 millionaires. The 5 stars are the cabaret clubs. You can see where my heart is.
Yeah.
I spent way too much time doing that and, like, trying to find other side quests, and there was one where it's, like, the gun dealer had to get stuff, and I started to do that before I lost patience with it, and by the time I had done all of that, it was like, what's even going on in the main story anymore? And it didn't make I don't know, for Kiryu's story in particular, I feel like it messed up the pacing of it. I was more invested in Majima's story to begin with, so that helped, but the pacing there was a little bit weird.
Yeah.
But that was one where I don't know that I would have changed that. I really enjoyed Yakuza 0. It was a game that I was, like, wanting to play. If that makes sense. Not that I don't want to play games, but it was a game that I was, like, excited and would play for longer than I intended to play when I played it. Which to me, I don't know, something about that feeling and that experience is like, that's a well-paced game.
Sure.
Sort of. Even though this one was not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, like, there's the whole game's pacing, right? And then it starts getting more and more granular, and each thing has pacing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's not, I guess there is in story chapters, there's some level design, but, like, each level has pacing, each side quest has pacing, each boss fight has pacing. Mm-hmm. And if those smaller parts are working, then in the moment where you're playing all of them, it feels good, right? But then when you get back to the major plot, maybe you're like, well, how long has it been since...
Well, it's something that I've found that I'm much more willing to forgive in this. I'm really enjoying all of these games that I've played lately that are relatively contained open worlds with side quests that I can relatively easily track and that are relatively... Yeah. I've said relatively like 20 times, but that are like relatively contained. Like, again, like you mentioned Final Fantasy VII Remake. I didn't find any of those side quests, like, riveting or game-changing, although I do always love a good arena. Yeah. But because there were not too many of them, and mostly they were pretty easy to track, it was still, like, I was excited to do it. Now, fortunately for me, I had sort of an imposed, I need to finish this game before I'm away from my PS4 for a week and a half deadline, or I might have tried to do the dumb thing of trying to get all the battle intel things, and just done a ton of grinding to level up my stupid revive materia. But I didn't do that, which I think ultimately helped the pacing. Now, that game, I think, has its own pacing issues, which... this was not on the podcast. I was just talking to you about... Yeah,
because you hadn't quite finished it.
Right. So, that game, I think, has its own pacing issues, just by virtue of the fact that it's the first part of a question mark game series. Yeah. And I think some of the introduction of the boss... trying to dance around it a little just in case. Some of the introduction of our final boss man, you know him. You already know him, okay? But, like, let's pretend I'm not spoiling it. Could have been handled in a way that felt better paced as someone who was just playing this game without a ton of context. But I'll put that aside for now. We can talk about that when I've totally forgotten what I think about it in 4 weeks.
Sounds
on the next
good.
Side quest. And then, like, Nier Automata. Again, I think I enjoyed the side quest for that game almost more than I did the main story. But also, I ruined the pacing for that game on my own because I played the first part of it and then put it down for, like, a year.
Yeah, I wonder if the side quest seemed poorly paced to you because... I mean, I think it has, like, a built-in failsafe for itself. Like, maybe it was Route C that was really bothering you. But, like, since A and B are so similar plot-wise, that, like... you really get those events down, no matter how much side questing you're doing. But since you played A and then didn't play anymore for like 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, I think the side quests for me, I thought worked really nicely. I actually enjoyed the side quests. But I do think that by playing A and then not playing the rest of it for quite a while, I lost some of the emotional resonance of B and then of C.
I mean, I think that's the case with anything, right? Like, if you watch the first season of a TV show and then come back to it in 6 months and watch seasons 2 and 3, are you really getting the full emotional impact?
I know, but I do think Nier is a little bit unique in that you do the same thing twice, and so much of what's important about that is noticing what's different the second time, and I hadn't.
Yeah, that too.
So that's my own fault, but also it's probably something that you run into almost necessarily by creating a game that relies on you doing like actual multiple playthroughs. That you raise the stakes and raise the risks of somebody putting it down for a long time when there's such a natural stop point. To put it down and play something else for a little while. And that little while can become a long while, if you're me. But I'm willing to admit that I am just a bad game player, because I played Bastion in the past week or so, and I ruined the pacing of that game, too, by spending a long time on one of the proving grounds. I don't understand. It was so much harder than all of the other ones. I don't get it. I couldn't even finish it. The stupid rocket one, stupid cannon one, and played that for like an hour or two, not in multiple sessions, before I was like, okay, fine, we'll go to the end. So yeah. So
but that's something you have to bear in mind, right? Like, especially the more stuff and freedom you give the player, is that you just have to assume that the player is going to ruin the pacing for themselves, right? Like, you can have all these plans in place, and it just is for somebody, or a great number of somebodies, it just won't work, right? Or they'll get distracted or whatever. So the more freedom that you give the player, like, the more fail-safes you have to have in place for keeping the pacing, like, okay.
That said, I think that side quest bloat is a real problem. A real kind of a growing problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, a lot of early open world games were, like, empty.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they were these big worlds, but it seemed like there was nothing to do in them. And so the immediate response to that is like, what if everything's something to do? What if there are 5 million Korok seeds?
Oh boy. What if there are 5 million Korok seeds? What if I am looking forward to playing the Pokemon DLC, but what if there are 2,000 Diglets?
Yeah.
And I realize that perhaps the response to that should be, well, Madelyn, you don't have to do it all.
But they encourage you to do it all.
I know.
Right? Like, they reward you for doing more things. And so the player feels like they should do more things.
So I want to talk about pacing then in open world games a little bit. I'll scale it back a little now. We've looked at our kind of story games and how do you pace those? And it's like, well, maybe you shouldn't put all your side quests so the player can complete them right before the final boss.
Yeah, but even those are, like, a little bit open worldy, right? Like, that's a
right.
symptom of open world games.
No, that's true.
Like, there's smaller open worlds or weirder open worlds, but both, like, Trails and
Final Fantasy and
Yakuza and Nier are all open worldy.
And, like, cheers to the open worldy games, because that's really my preferred game genre.
Open world-ish.
Like, it's open world, but, like, you have a to-do list.
Yeah.
That's my preferred open world game. Anyway, so in, like, true open world games, I mean, that pacing problem becomes just, like, 20 times harder. Yeah. Maybe this pandemic will force me to go back to Breath of the Wild, right? Like, maybe I will eventually just have a moment of insanity and decide that I'm going to force myself to play it and find those Korok seeds.
Yeah.
But that game was hard for me because I really need someone to guide I get distracted by things.
Yeah.
You hate watching me play this game.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know why, like, Final Fantasy 15 ended up so appealing to me. It doesn't make sense when I think about it. Like, it's not something I should enjoy because I don't enjoy the idea of Breath of the Wild. And all the other open world games I've tried, like big open world games, I have passed on to Josh, like Horizon.
Yeah, which he loved.
Yeah. But it's just not for me. But, like, the only open world game where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna play some more Final Fantasy 15, is
well,
that?
I think for me, a big part of what makes a game feel well-paced, even if it is not, like at least well-paced within each play session, even if I then look back and I'm like, wow, I ran the Cabaret Club for like 20 hours, is making the game like a space that you want to hang out in, right? Again, I can look back at playing Persona and be like, well, that game was too long.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed, and that's why I took these like giant breaks in playing Persona periodically, and then finally really got into it and kind of binged through the end, is that it became a space where it was like, there are characters that I wanted to hang out with.
Yeah.
And I would bet that that is a part of why you liked Final Fantasy 15, is that, you know, we love our big friendship energy here at Talk This.
That's true.
And so even though you had kind of this trappings of a game genre that's not really your thing, like, you had characters that you enjoyed hanging out with, even if, like, you didn't do anything that much during your play session.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's real. Like, I sometimes think about... I've yet to play Persona 1 and 2, but of 3, 4, and 5, I really enjoyed 3, and I really enjoyed 5, and I really did not enjoy 4. And sorry, Persona 4 fans, you're legitimate, but I really did not like the cast of 4, I think. And because I did not like the cast, the pacing issues, I felt like, also came to the forefront. Because I wasn't thinking about other things, right?
Definitely.
I was like, guys, there's murders happening. What are we doing?
Yeah. No, it's way easier to be forgiving when it's like, it's a space that you like to be in for whatever reason that is, right? Like, that can be for you. Like, neither of us has played Ghost of
Tsushima.
Samurai Ghost.
Tsushima.
Open World Samurai.
Tsushima.
I'm just making up titles for it.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't remember the name of the director, but it's Madelyn.
Kurosawa?
Thank you. Ghost of Kurosawa. Kurosawa's Spirit. I have a lot of alternate titles for this game, so hit me up if y'all are making it a collector's edition or something. But maybe that's a game that's a space for you that you want to enjoy just because, like, it's so beautiful. Right? You can think about that for any number of games where... you know, like, that game got good reviews, but not, like, life-changing game reviews. But I could definitely see how, for many people, just the world being that beautiful would make it a space that they want to, like, hang out in.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, something, like, if you're really attached to Link, and, like, just, like, hanging out with Link is something that is nice for you. No, you know what I mean.
I love to hang out with my boy Zelda.
You know what I mean, though, right? Like, if you're someone who's, like, really attached to the... I don't mean... There's plenty of other reasons you would enjoy Breath of the Wild, right? But one reason you might enjoy it is if you have very good nostalgic memories of the old Zelda games. Just, like, being in this, like, incredibly large, beautiful world with Link might be something that makes it a place that you want to hang out in more than some other similar open world.
Right. I mean, objectively, I don't really think that Breath of the Wild has bad pacing.
No, it's just you get to do it all.
Yeah.
And I'm not very, clearly, as we've demonstrated, I cannot be trusted to pace myself.
Yes.
So, I recognize it's my own fault.
Yeah.
Personal failing.
But I think that's the thing I was talking about with, like, why Yakuza feels fun, even though, like, overall you're like, well, maybe that could be paced better.
Yeah.
Is because each individual moment is paced fine.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's really key for open world games. Like, are you pacing, if someone finds something, are they feeling encouraged to follow that quest to the end, right? Or are they getting distracted and picking up, like, 8 different things at one time?
Yeah.
So, like, are you pacing your individual events well for the player? And this has to do with, like, just, like, playtime, too. Like, is the stuff that you're offering good for, like, a session of playing the game?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they too big for the player to be playing in, like, a 2 to 3 hour slot?
Sure. Well, let's talk about that, too. Because I've seen sort of around this kind of games are too long discussion on Twitter. It was kind of the sub-discussion of what is it that adult gamers want, right?
Yeah.
It kind of falls into 2 camps. either adult gamers are too busy for video games these days, but they still love them, and they want games that they can finish.
Mm-hmm.
Or the kind of other part of that is, or they want games that they can play for half an hour at a time and put down for long periods of time and still be able to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's that camp. Those are kind of two sub-camps within a camp. But
Yeah.
the we're too busy gamers.
Yeah.
And in the other camp, we have the we're poor gamers.
Yeah.
There's certainly overlap. Many of us are both busy and poor.
It's true.
But in the other camp, we have the we're poor gamers who are angry that games are... Not are angry. I feel like they're
Gamers are angry.
They are all angry, but I won't put that on just this camp. Who feel like paying $60 for a game is a lot for them. And who knows how they're going to feel about $70 games.
Yeah.
And they feel like if they're going to spend that amount of money on a game, they should get their money's worth in quantity.
Yeah.
And like getting a shorter game for that amount of money is a ripoff. And so they would perhaps prefer games that are padded with side quest content or with grinding content or that kind of thing, as opposed to a shorter, tighter game.
Yeah.
And that's tough to balance, because those are... You can't really win both those people over.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's what do you think adult gamers want?
It depends on the adult. I mean, I am definitely busy, and I'm not poor, but I'm not rolling in it either. I am not as I'm definitely more in the I'm busy camp, I think, as a personal preference. And that's not to say that I don't play large games. I mean, Fire Emblem does not count because I was not busy then. I was the opposite of busy.
Yes.
But since then, I've played some rather long games.
You have.
And even finished a couple of them. And I've managed it fine, you know. So it just depends on the person.
Yeah, I do think the pandemic has, well, I don't think really changed my perspective on this, but just like nuanced it some.
Yeah.
In that, I have actually finished some games. First time in a while, and been able to like sit down and play them for amounts of time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I think part of the reason it's hard is maybe like just how online everybody is, right? Like the game gets its like 2 to 3 week hype cycle.
Yeah.
Right? Where everybody's playing it and talking about it and stuff. And if you can't put in the time to play and finish that hype new game within that time cycle, like everybody's moved on from it by the time that you're even halfway through.
Yeah.
Is generally how I've experienced it when I get new games.
Which makes sense. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I've sort of sacrificed ever being able to participate in timely discourse.
Yeah.
Just because, well, yeah, I'm reluctant to buy games except on Nintendo systems at full price. I did buy Final Fantasy at full price. I probably didn't need to. I didn't start playing it for like another month after I bought it. I don't know if it had gone on sale by that point, but maybe it had. But I had a GameStop coupon. Oh, I have a GameStop. Actually, it expired a couple days ago. It's not July.
Darn.
Shoot. Think about how to spend that.
I mean, you already spent it.
I've already spent it on something great.
Oh no, our pacing's getting ahead of ourselves.
Oh boy. I've totally distracted. What was I actually thinking about? Okay, I did pay full price for Final Fantasy, but that's what I feel like is weird about the, like, I'm poor argument.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry that the fact that, I mean, $60 is not nothing for me, either.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry that the fact that $60 is a lot for you might exclude you from getting to be a part of the, like, loud part of the discourse in the beginning. It doesn't really. You're still welcome to go on Metacritic and write what you thought of the game before you played it.
Well, now you have to wait 72 hours after the game's out. Or 48 hours? You have to wait some amount of hours after the game's out now.
Sure, you can still go on 3 days after and write what you think of the game before you play it.
Yeah, but I do think that will preclude some people.
You're right, of course.
I don't think it will totally eliminate
I'm not
review
saying
bombing,
it's a bad
but,
thing. I'm just saying you can still participate in the discourse, just in a different way.
Yeah. And
in ways that are not malicious like that, too.
Yeah.
But So, like, I'm sorry that our capitalist system has put you in a position where you can't participate in that 2-week hype cycle. But if that's the position that you're in, why would you want a bad game that you paid that money for?
Yeah. And you know what you can do? You can spend, like, $30 on the all-in-one Kingdom Hearts set, and then you never have to buy a game again.
It's true.
It is always on sale for like $20 or $30.
Kingdom Hearts games are badly paced. Let's just put that out there.
Yeah, but you get them for all $30, so they can be as badly paced as they want to be.
That's true. They're bargain badly paced. Anyway, of course, and I won't dive into this too deeply, but this is a potential problem in development, right? As we have these people clamoring for longer and longer games so that the games that cost the same that they've always cost can justify that spend, that's a problem in a lot of different ways. So we'll leave that for another day. I don't want to wrap up without talking about a preview for next week's episode, right? Talking about Animal Crossing and games like that, ongoing games.
Sure.
Because that is just a whole other can of pacing worms.
Yeah.
I've kind of enjoyed the trickle of content for Animal Crossing.
Oh,
personally.
sure, yeah.
Well, I mean, I've liked it better, I think, than if I had gotten all of that at the beginning. I think. It's certainly been effective for making me want to keep checking in with the game.
Yeah.
It's hard to judge how that would have felt if I had been working like I was working before the pandemic and that I was, like, running around everywhere and not getting home until late and that kind of thing. If I would be quite as regular about checking into Animal Crossing as I am. But I know some people are very angry about that. Not about my personal play schedule, about the trickle of content.
I mean, it's all free content, so...
Yeah, I know.
And I don't really know how it's super different than other stuff, you know? Like, they're just adding stuff as the seasons come, right? Whereas perhaps I don't really know how it worked on the DS games, but you still would get new stuff happening as the seasons come, right? And I guess the difference now, that's something I'd actually be really interested in, and this isn't a judgment on either camp, but I would be really interested to see of the people who did a lot of time traveling at the start versus people who didn't, how many people are still playing Animal Crossing semi-regularly.
You think the time travelers will be over it?
Yeah.
That's interesting, though, because I feel like the people... Okay, granted, I'll grant that some of the time travelers are like... They want to be done.
Yeah.
They want to be the best, and they want to be done. But I would bet that a fair number of them are, like, super fans, too.
That's true.
Who've wanted to... Because, yeah, there's only so much you could do in a day. Although I was playing for much longer at a time than I do now in the first couple of weeks, month or so.
Yeah, probably shouldn't have. I wonder if the pandemic maybe ruined the early pacing of Animal Crossing.
God, those iron nuggets!
I need those iron nuggets now! Don't you know how much time I'm spending alone in my house?
To wait a whole day for my 30 iron nuggets!
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, that's certainly the pandemic. We're circling back around to this 2020 pacing. Did weird things to pacing in life, but Animal Crossing pacing.
Yeah, and they could have known that, you know? You can't know what circumstances your game is released into ahead of time.
I mean, thank goodness they delayed the launch of that game.
Yeah.
How many infections do you think Animal Crossing prevented in March? March, April.
Truly a savior.
Truly Animal Crossing.
Tom Nook is here for
bought
us.
us a little bit of time that we could throw away. I feel like it's weird with Animal Crossing because I really kind of ebb and flow in how I'm interested in it. It feels way more mood-based than anything to do with the actual game.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'm just motivated to do something to my island, and I am, like, involved in it, and other times it's like, well, I don't want my neighbors to... I am attached to my neighbors. That Animal Crossing definitely scratches that itch of the place you want to be, to some extent.
Yeah. I did see an article earlier this week of someone who hadn't touched his island for, like, 2.5 months. Mm-hmm. And he went back and nobody had moved out. Everybody was like, whoa, why were you gone so long? But nobody had moved out. There were some weeds and stuff.
Okay.
He then set his clock 200 years in the future, and still nobody had moved out.
Okay. That's kind.
Yeah.
That's not how it used to work.
Yeah. I
appreciate that. Were they really concerned after? It was amazing. They're alive. 200 years. There should have been...
Yeah, apparently someone was like, "Are you a mirage or something?" I think he also has Rory the lion, and he was just like, "Let's work out, man," both times. So
Rory's unfazed. Rory's the same. But no, I want to check in because, well, God forbid, a good boyfriend miss a good turnip price, right? But
right.
You know, I want if there's like a good piece of furniture or. This is the day that I'm actually going to get a recipe from Pascal. Took me a minute to remember his name. Or something. Like, there's always, like, some little, like, will this be the day my neighbors say something delightful?
Yeah. I go back and forth on this because on one hand, it feels a little like slightly exploitative mobile game mechanics in some ways. Which they've had a mobile game for a while, right? So it makes sense why maybe that would be creeping into the mainline games. But on the other hand, when you do play, there's always something to do. Like, there's all these different things that you can do. Yeah. You can set your own goals for the day. Like, limited goals, but your own goals for the day.
Again,
like
an open world with a to-do list. Nice.
But again, that comes down to the player to manage themselves, right? And it's not a gacha game, so whatever, I guess. But, like, it's not... really, like, giving anybody a gambling problem, except maybe on the turnip market.
Yes.
But that's not anybody's real money. Well, maybe it is, actually.
It's not supposed... The terms of service say it's not supposed to be.
It's not supposed to be anybody's real money. But there is some measure of, like, well, you gotta check in every day. You gotta talk to your neighbors. You gotta see what's on sale. You gotta shoot stuff down. You know, the fruit is blossoming. Like, it's just, like, a lot of stuff that really requires you to set your own limits, or else it can get... both overwhelming and frustrating.
Do you play any other games that are like that? I can't think of anything else that I play.
I mean, I have a couple of mobile games right now.
Well, sure. Dark Road.
Yes. I need to... I don't think it's the international release of the new story missions. I think that's sometime in August. But, I don't check into that every day. I've been checking into Sino Alice every day. So that's a little bit like that.
Yeah, because I do feel like I hate to be only talking about Animal Crossing in this world, because obviously it's very much, like, the mobile game idea is much more, and even, like World of Warcraft or something like that is much more, like, check in regularly, and just because I don't engage in those areas of gaming very much, I feel like Animal Crossing is the only one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk on Twitter when Yoshi P, who does Final Fantasy XIV, I don't know his real name. Everybody refers to him as Yoshi P. But he did some interviews, like, when some new patch was coming out, and people, they were like, he just talks about how if you've gotten through all the content, like, take a break from the game.
Yeah. Play
another game, do something else, and then there'll be new content, and you can come back and play that. So it seems like, you know, he has a somewhat healthy idea of what he wants his player base to be, right? Well, like, it's not necessarily that he wants every player to log on every day.
Except that game is a subscription service, right?
Yeah. But you can cancel your subscription, I think, for temporarily. I would have to look into it. I'm not sure.
It's a healthy attitude if you can cancel it temporarily and nothing goes away. It's a little less cute if it's like, oh yeah, take a break and still pay us $14.95 a month.
But isn't that the same idea of, like, the poor gamers? That's like, I need my money's worth for this?
It is, except
like, if I'm paying however much, like, for Netflix every month, and I'm only watching one TV show, like, does that mean I should be paying less for Netflix?
I guess not. Okay, as long as you feel like you're getting, I don't know what Final Fantasy XIV costs a year, but if it's, let's say it's $15 a month, as long as you feel like you're getting, like, $300 a year, ooh, is that right? That's not right. That's not even close to right.
Nope.
That would be if it was 20 months in the year. Yikes, buddy. As long as you feel like $180 a year doesn't feel like an inappropriate price, then okay, fine. It's just split up. Fine. But
I mean, I don't know if he means, like, take 2 months off either. He's just, what he means is don't log in every day.
okay, to that extent, I agree. If the extent was you're done and there's nothing new to do for 2 months, and you're going to keep paying me for that 2 months.
Yeah, that's not, I don't think that's not
less.
quite how online games work, Madelyn.
I know it's not.
It's just that there's not, like, new content. So
I
it doesn't
know
mean
it's
there's
not how
not
they
things to
work.
do.
I know, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I took you literally, and I shouldn't have. I apologize.
I'm going to read exactly what he said.
I don't need that. I'll give the man the benefit of the doubt. I'm being too cynical. While you're pulling that up, sometimes you want a game that's poorly paced sometimes. You know what game that I want that's poorly paced for specific situations? Civilization on an airplane. That game is too long. Civilization takes too much time.
Civilization is pretty long.
And you can play it shorter. Like, you can change it, but I never want to. It feels like moves too fast, not enough turns to do enough. But man, Civilization being poorly paced really made the flight back from Japan just literally fly. Are you giving me the quote?
Yeah.
While I rant about Civilization over here?
So here's one of the ones. So it's not about forcing players to keep playing the game consistently. If you just consume everything with each major patch, then you've played everything, then you can play other games. You can spend your time and plan around your timing. If you want to come back to Final Fantasy XIV, you can come back and catch up easily. Everybody has different hobbies and ways they want to spend their time. They're quite busy. Thanks to the game cycle we've established, it's easier to accommodate the players, to let them use their own time, which is kind of unique to Final Fantasy XIV. By keeping that up, it's brought the world of Final Fantasy XIV to the stage that we're in now. This was 2019, December 2019.
Okay, well that sounds nice and wholesome, great. Respectful of my time. Alright, I'm sorry I disparaged you, dude. My bad. So one last thing I feel like that's important about pacing that we haven't talked about is all sorts of the little quality of life things in games that can ruin it.
Yeah.
And Animal Crossing has really gotten away with a lot, but I'll save that for next week, I guess. Yeah. But you mentioned in our notes, like markers telling players where to go, which I hadn't even thought about as a pacing device ever before, but that's a smart thought.
Yeah, like all like Naughty Dog games especially like started using like yellow to mark like the edge you're supposed to go to. And it's a little dumb, right? Like it feels a little stupid. Like how dumb do you think I am? But ultimately, you are that dumb.
Yes.
And if that yellow wasn't there, you would spend a very long time wandering around this room, wondering what on earth you're supposed to do.
Well, I got pissed for the 2 or 3 side quests in Final Fantasy VII that were only sort of marked on the map.
Yeah.
I was like, come on.
Yeah.
Well, how much time do you think I have?
Yeah.
Expect me to actually search the world.
Yeah. So it's like a gentle, obvious sort of guide to keep you on the right track so that you're not like getting frustrated about how you don't know what to do next. Right? And some people really hate that sort of stuff. Right? But I think I think that the idea of like, oh, a game should be as little like a game as possible is a little silly, ultimately.
Yeah. I appreciate the think pieces about that kind of thing, right? Because of course there are things that are immersion breaking and whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't really feel like I'm often playing the kinds of games where that is a problem for me.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun to think about, like, ludonarrative dissonance, right? Like, that's, like, the basic building block in which to start criticizing games, right? It's not the ceiling, it's the floor, people. Yes. But ultimately, just because something has game-like elements, that doesn't mean that it's narratively dissonant.
Yes. It's like, that's why Red Dead is, again, for many reasons, not going to be my game. It's just, there's too much detail. There's too much detail there. It's like already Animal Crossing annoys me because I can't craft multiple things of something at once.
Yeah.
I don't want to literally watch my character build a chair.
Yeah.
Maybe I do. I don't know. I would have to see what it looked like. But I don't want to, like, literally watch them build a chair. I don't want things that are, like, gamey to take me a long time in any capacity.
Yeah.
I want it to be pretty smooth and easy. I really don't want to spend a lot of time wandering around not knowing where to go.
Yeah.
As happens a lot in strategy guide era games. Thinking of Deep Jungle and Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
And The Good Boyfriend's long-time anger about having to go back into the tent that you were just in. Which to me was like, duh, of course you do that, but of course I have that strategy guide just, like, memorized.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, like, my least favorite pacing thing is when I'm wandering around and I don't know where to go.
Yeah. Hence the yellow marker.
Thank God for the yellow marker.
Yeah.
Well,
or even stuff like healing yourself, right? Like, this isn't really pacing anymore, but, like, if I had to watch, like, someone, like, be like, oh, I specifically got shot in the hip, so I better put the bandage on my hip.
Yep.
No, I just want Joel to constantly wrap his left arm. You know, no matter where he got hit, it's just put the bandages on the left arm and you're fine.
The man should really get some armor for his left arm specifically or something like that.
One of the more interesting pieces I read did try to use, like, music theory to talk about pacing.
Yeah, this is super interesting.
Yeah, like the rhythm, melody, harmony, form, timbre, dynamics, and texture. I did think a few of them were a little bit, like, it feels like they're a little bit the same thing when applied to game design.
Yeah.
But it's a fun way to think about it, right? Of each, like, especially applying it to, like, a single level. Like, each level as a piece of music that you want to polish and make flow nicely, even when performed by a, middle school
amateur
orchestra.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a good metaphor, Emma.
Thank you.
I liked that.
Uh-huh.
Also made me think about how important actual music is for pacing in a game.
Yeah.
So many things play in that you just don't think about.
Yeah. All of the Kingdom Hearts scenes that just wouldn't work
at all
if the music was not playing.
All the Nier scenes that wouldn't work.
You know what? I saw someone, I was like, someone was like, here's some bad voice acting things in Kingdom Hearts. And I was like, oh, yes, Terra's a bad voice actor. And then they did, like, the I'm so flattered line from Kingdom Hearts 2. I was like, that's just blatantly wrong. That's a stellar line
What
read.
is that line?
When Roxas comes into Axel and he's like, I'm so flattered.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. I love that.
Different strokes for different
I
folks.
was like, excuse me.
Different...
How is that with Terra's? I don't understand.
Oh, yes. Let's just roast Terra. This is the talk this tangent moment.
I'm sorry,
Let's roast
Jason.
Terra.
I'm sorry that your audio quality was noticeably worse than your others.
Why was it so bad, the DLC?
I don't know.
What happened to the audio? Anyway,
couldn't
get
come
back
in.
on topic.
He had to record it.
This is a side quest right before the final boss, Emma. We gotta reel it in.
He had to record it on, like, his laptop.
Stop
or
it.
something.
On his iPhone. Yeah, to close it off appropriately, I think that the real kicker for pacing in a game for me is the final boss sequence.
Yeah.
And that if it's not intense enough or long enough or correct, it really deflates even things that worked well up to that point.
Yeah.
That was my one disappointment in Bastion. That there, like, wasn't a final boss, really.
But you picked him up, and then you kept carrying him, and the guys stopped shooting at you.
That would have been a final boss if they kept shooting at me.
No, the whole point is that they stopped shooting at you. This is why I got so mad at Iconoclast, because they tried to do something like that, and they just, like,
oh, man.
Yeah, leave Royal on the button.
That's one for the long-time fans.
Don't even say anything about it.
Long-time Talk This listeners, you remember how angry Emma used to be about Iconoclast, like, 3 years ago?
Bastion is a great example of how to do, like, you're picking up somebody and carrying them. And it's got the beautiful song playing. And in Iconoclast, it's just like, well, peace, Royal, because I gotta get this button open.
No, you're right. I'm not saying the ending of Bastion didn't work. I'm just saying it would have worked better for me had there been some kind of culminating boss sequence before I picked him up.
I guess so. Fine. Yeah.
So I didn't ever feel like... I don't know. Maybe the combat in that game is not really designed to be that challenging, but I wanted a little challenge at the end. Even if it's something like Final Fantasy VII, where I got so angry that I got through like 2/3 of it and then died and had to do it all again. Sometimes that little bit of pressure and frustration, like we were talking about at the beginning with boss fights, is an important part of the pacing.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason I think Danganronpa V3's last trial is so well paced is because the final boss fight is
Air quotes there, listeners.
Well, it is. It's just not a typical boss fight.
I know. I'm just helping them understand.
Is so perfectly paced. Like, after I did it, I had to put the controller down and take a few deep breaths, you know?
Well, that's why I forgive all of the Disney worlds in Kingdom Hearts. Because the boss ladder at the end is usually, chef's kiss.
Yeah.
You have to say chef's kiss on a podcast. You can't really go.
I just did it.
That was pretty dramatic. Well, Emma, anything left to say about pacing? Answer that opening question. Are games too long?
Games are, yes, probably. Some of them. Some games are too long.
Games are more often too long than too short.
Yes. But just my advice to anybody making anything is just, like, don't assume your audience is stupid, but just, like, a little bit distractible.
Yeah.
You know?
If you provide them too many opportunities to get distracted, they will.
Yes. And, like, this applies to any story, right? Yeah. Like, if you are being too subtle with something, like, is it really there? To be honest. Like, sometimes you just say it to the audience, you know? Sometimes you just want to clearly state your message.
Yeah.
Or, clearly lay out what is happening. It doesn't always have to be some puzzle box or whatever.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on stories. Be straightforward with your player or viewer or reader.
And if you're going to have a bunch of side quests, a to-do list, please.
Yes, please, a to-do list. Otherwise...
really helps.
I don't understand how you... Like, what is that? What is the game? It also starts with an I, with Ajna.
Indivisible.
Indivisible?
Yeah, Indivisible is a game whose pacing was bad.
It was good up until, like, they dumped tons of side quests on you without a to-do list.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought the first half of the game had very good pacing, and then suddenly, side quests.
Because, of course, I wanted to do them all.
Yeah, me too.
And I ruined the pacing of the game. So basically, be really thoughtful about how many side quests you give me at a time and where you put them, and recognize that I will want to do them all before proceeding into the main story.
Yeah.
And you better hope that your main story is memorable enough that I remember what I was doing.
Yeah.
There we go. We fixed pacing in games.
Good. It's over. All games will be perfectly paced from now on.
Well, listeners, do you have a game that you want to add to Emma's perfectly paced list? You probably do. Or do you have a game that you want to add to my list of, the side quests kind of ruined the main quest pacing for me and I loved it / hated it, depending on the game? Well, if you do, or if you have thoughts on how games might be better paced, or yes, indeed, if they are too long or too short, you should drop us a line. Check us out on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast, where you can follow us and tweet at us and watch Emma's latest video on YouTube.
It's very controversial.
On Topic Corner, the most controversial video on the Talk This YouTube to date. Including Click Like Boyfriends, the most innovative Kingdom Hearts move of all time. So that's saying something.
That one only has likes,
Because it's
the most innovative move.
How could you not? He glides into a ladder.
I know.
Past a dark ball.
Truly.
So you should check it out. I thought it was a great video. I really enjoyed it, and I have not played any of Tales of Cold Steel. I called it Tales of Cold Steel, so that tells you how much of it I've played. I haven't played any Trails of Cold Steel. I've only listened to Emma rant about it on the podcast. And I still really enjoyed it and thought it was a great video. So now you know, Emma.
Thanks.
But also check out our other social media because we got stuff there for you. Should I revive the Instagram?
Maybe. Or maybe we should just kill it.
No, we can't kill it.
Can't kill it?
It would ruin my patter.
Okay.
But you should also check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read more about the show, see the games that are in the hat, and check out our blog featuring long-running series, Clickbait Boyfriend, where my boyfriend, in addition to doing the most innovative move of all time, is also playing Kingdom Hearts. And
one day he will be done.
This week.
This week he shall finish.
I'm so close, everybody. I just haven't been able to... I've had too many life side quests on the main quest of finishing the Clickbait Boyfriend series. But I did make some images this week. It's coming. And Split Screen, where Emma and I are watching Coffee Prince and My Hero Academia.
Yep, there should have been one yesterday.
There was one yesterday, I think is what you mean to say.
Yes, there was one yesterday.
Thank you. Awesome. And finally, most importantly, if you enjoyed the show and want to listen to more every Sunday at noon, you should subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, anywhere that you can find podcasts. You can find Talk This.
Woo!
Next week, we're definitely talking about Animal Crossing.
And Cooking Mama.
Oh, yes. Oh, I get to make up for not playing any of the games last week because I played both of those games. Oh, that's going to be a fun episode, everybody.
Yes.
We've got the Cooking Mama drama.
Yeah.
We've got Animal Crossing that you've already heard us spend hours talking about over the past several months.
Yeah.
It is going to be quality content.
Quality.
And well-paced.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Probably.
Well, that's it for this week's show. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Emma, do you wanna set them off?
I hope that this week, time is paced like it should be.